The Nets start off strong, but they fade late. The Bucks win their 15th straight game. The Nets lose their third straight game. We saw some glimpses of what this team could look like moving forward, but we saw some of the downside as well. Going to break down the loss to the Bucks, Mikal Bridges' big game, things that went well, things that did not go so well, and what's in store for this Nets team. We're going to do all that, but first, theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo. All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am Doug Norrie coming at you live on YouTube and on that podcast feed. The owner and operator of DFSR.com. If you need NBA projections, MLB right around the corner as well. We're grinding it every single night over at DFSR.com. So go hang out if you're playing on FanDuel or DraftKings. Got you covered there. No Adam Armbrecht today as we trade off on the live podcast following the game. Sometimes in the NBA life, that's how you got to roll. That's how we're going to roll tonight. Did a little first half, second half thing with the podcast. Just kind of like the Nets did a first half and second half thing in this game against the Bucks. Look, in the end, this was a game that comes down to two halves. The Nets played amazing in the first half, and they played terrible in the second half. And sometimes there's a lot more going on, and sometimes it's just that easy. And that's kind of what you got with this Nets team tonight. 62-52 in the first half, 66. They win the first half, 62-52. They lose the second half, 66-42 to a Bucks team that just dropped its 15th straight win right on Brooklyn's head. And you sit there, kind of staring at yourself saying, what's going on? What is the real team here? Which one of these two teams should I believe? Do I believe the team that in the first half was causing all kinds of defensive chaos, used their length to their advantage, really threw the Bucks, for a loop, contested nearly every single shot, made everything difficult on the defensive end, made their shots on the offensive end as well, and looked like a team that could stand toe-to-toe with a championship contender, maybe some people are going to say the championship favorite in the Milwaukee Bucks. And it just all goes to pot in the second half when they get absolutely blitzed, cannot stop anybody. Bucks score at will, basket over basket over basket, driving to the rim. Very easy looks for the Bucks. Nothing looked all that difficult. And you get to the end of the day and you say, what am I watching here? Which team is the real team here? Which one of these Nets squads is the squad that I can hang my hat on? Because you never want to make judgments about the teams at their worst. You never want to make judgments about the teams at their best. And yet here we are with this complete dichotomy of a performance by the Nets, now having dropped 5 of their last 6 games. This is just a team that's struggling for kind of any kind of consistency. Although 5 of their last 6, 7 of their last 9, struggling for any kind of consistency really at both ends. I mean, maybe a little bit more on the offensive end. And you think to yourself, well, what is the real Brooklyn team here? What am I looking for through the rest of this season and through the rest of this, even into the future with this cast of characters? And it gets very, very confusing because, like I said, in the first half, we're watching this game. And at one point, the Nets looked like they were rolling. They had really dialed up on the defensive end. They went into halftime. They had 9 steals between Cam Johnson, Nick Claxton, and Mikal Bridges. 9 steals, and I think 4 blocks between those guys. And it looked like, every single possession that the Bucks had the ball was a problem for them. If you can, it's hard to remember now because we just watched the second half, which was literally the complete and utter opposite. But at the time, you're thinking, okay, this is how the Nets can use their length. This is how they can flash doubles at Giannis. This is how they can clog up passing lanes. This is how they can make every shot really, really difficult for a team that, is among the best in the business. This is how they can sow chaos on the defensive end using this length that, after the trade deadline, we said to ourselves, what's something that the Nets are going to have to really play into? It's that if they're going to start this starting lineup of Spencer Dinwiddie, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Nick Claxton, they have to get after it on the defensive end. They're going to switch everything, and they have to make it really, really frustrating for other teams. and we'll get if we can scrape out just enough offense with that unit, then maybe we have something here. Championship contender, no. Fun team to watch, most definitely. And that's the version of the team that we got in the first half of this game. We got this team that was just everything you kind of believed it could be. I mean, they just had they forced so many turnovers. They really, really frustrated the Bucks on that end of the court. They made it very difficult getting to the rim. Shots for Giannis were not easy, right? I mean, he's going to get his just because he's such a force, but you could see that it was difficult. You could see that the Nets were really feeling that the scheme that they were running was working. You could see that they were even preemptively switching at times. Claxton had an amazing one around the perimeter where he caught Holiday coming under the screen, switched and got a great contest in the lane. And it was like, okay, this is a team that's communicating. This is a team that knows sort of what it is on this end of the court. And they can really, really cause problems for teams. And this is what they're going to have to be able to do every single game to be able to hang in the games, because that's just what their core competency right now, at least in the structure by which they're playing these lineups, is going to be on the defensive end. And that's what you really love to see. You really, really love to see that aspect of it coming for them on that end of the court. And yeah, they hit some open looks. They were able to get into the lane a little bit. They were able to generate enough offense just when you thought things were going to start bogging down, maybe a little late in the shot clock with the way that Dinwiddie and company run offense. They were still able to get looks. And you come out of that first half thinking, oh, this might happen. They might take Milwaukee here. 14 straight games for Milwaukee. That might go down right here in Brooklyn. We might put an end to that right here, up 10 at halftime. And the second half, I mean, to the point where Adam knew that he was not going to be on the podcast tonight, and he kind of he alluded to the idea, hey, if they do this, I might have to just stop my plans and jump on. We were kind of feeling excited about it. And then the second half, it just goes completely downhill. 66-42. Nothing was working. They couldn't hit a single shot. At one point, it felt like they went an absolute eternity between hitting really any basket. Couldn't hit any threes. It was really only like 4 minutes of basketball time in the third quarter. It might as well have been a million. They couldn't make any shots. Everything was front rimmed. It looked like they had gotten tired. All the effort that they had probably put in on the both ends of the court in the first half, caught up with them a little bit. No one played major minutes here, but still the rotations were really, really short. We didn't see Cam Thomas come in till much later in his regular rotation in the third quarter. The rest of the bench, this was essentially a 7-man rotation. The rest of the bench was non-existent. And I think the rest of these guys had just kind of ran out of gas. And that's what happens when you play a team like Giannis and Drew and Chris Middleton, who's still coming off the bench for this team. They're not going to really let up at any point in the game. And when that's going to happen and you need to be dialed in defensively the whole game, yeah, fatigue is going to set in. It's unfortunate, but it happened. And that's definitely what looked like it happened to the Nets, on top of the fact that you're playing a very, very good team. This is a Bucks team that's not going to be rattled being down double digits. They know they have the best player on the court for sure. Best player in the NBA, maybe, depending on sort of where your vote lies on a certain day. So they're not going to get too concerned. And they put a 25-9 run on the Nets, and a lot of that was without Giannis even on the court. So this is a team, you don't get to be a championship contender without being able to keep your foot on the gas and not get rattled, even in an opposing stadium. And that's what the Bucks did. Hung it on the Nets in the second half. Nets couldn't get anything going. For a team that was winning by 10 at halftime, they raised the white flag with a few minutes left to go because this thing was utterly and completely over. And you could see it coming. You could see it coming at the end of the third quarter, like I said, without Giannis on the court, where they were just storming through them, 39-23 in the third. It was very obvious sort of what was happening in that third quarter. And kind of when you got to the end of that third quarter, you knew that, especially because it's this Bucks team, 14 wins in a row, now 15. Giannis, Drew, Middleton, Brolo, all these guys, once they kind of get their hooks into you, once they can kind of smell that blood in the water, see the blood in the water, smell the blood in the water, whatever you do with blood in the water, you got the feeling that we kind of knew how this book was written. And that was definitely the case. Tale of two games, rough to see it go that way. Rough to not be able to probably scrape it a little closer to a W near the end. But sometimes that's what you happen when you play championship teams, and your team is clearly not a championship team. Want to talk about Mikal Bridges' performance. Want to talk about what's coming up for the Nets also, and why this situation might get a little worse before it gets better. Going to talk to you all about all of that in a second. First, I tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. We are well past the midway part of the NBA season, but it's still the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers are going to get a no sweat first bet up to, wait for it, $1,000. That's bonus bets back. If your first bet doesn't win, all you have to do is download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, very easy to use. And you just bet on everything from the money line, points scored, threes drained. You get into the same game parlays. That's where you're going in. You're going into the same game. You're choosing whichever side of something you like. You want points, over under assists, rebounds, first basket scored. It's all in there. Double doubles. They got everything. Really, I mean, I could spend the rest of this podcast going through all the different options you have just in one same game parlay. Forget about what's going on with every single game, every single night. Just a little taste of what you're going to get over on FanDuel. Don't miss your chance to get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, one highlight. Well, there's a few highlights here in this game, but one continued highlight is the play of Mikal Bridges. And even in a loss to the Bucks, we're always going to be able to take away pieces of these games that are going to be on the positive side. Obviously, losses are negatives. There's no way around that. Some losses don't sting as bad as others. This one, you're playing a championship contender in the Bucks. It was kind of over late, so it's not like that heartbreaker that they've lost against Trae Young and the Hawks. I'm not trying to excuse any losses. It's all bad, but no one, I don't think, had the Nets penciled in to win this game going in. So hey, look, if we're trying to glass half full this thing, I guess that's it. But Mikal Bridges continues on. I don't want to call it an ascension, but a confirmation or an affirmation that the Nets got somebody real back in the Kevin Durant trade. You're never getting Kevin Durant back in any trade. That's just the way that is. That's the way the superstar hierarchy works. Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant. He's the top player of all time. So you're never getting him back. What you hope to get in these trades is, one, to claw back any kind of value. Two, to get a player that you can really look at and say, hey, we've got something. And that player might have been underutilized on his skill set in his previous stop. It wasn't totally the case with Bridges because he had been playing a lot with Devin Booker out of the lineup this season. And his usage rate had climbed this year as opposed to previous years. So there was already glimpses of what he was going to be able to possibly do on the offensive end, knowing that he already had the defensive acumen under his belt over those first 4 seasons in Phoenix. He'd become known to be and is one of the better on-ball defenders in the NBA. Super great length, quickness, very, very intelligent when it comes to that end of the court. But the offensive piece, to get real fair value back for Kevin Durant, to get anything close to not being totally devastated by trading Kevin Durant is probably the better way to put it. You had to have a guy like Bridges ascend to be somebody probably more than he had been at his previous stop. We are already seeing real signs of that. This is not the first game we've seen it, obviously. He's had multiple, go back 4 games to Miami where he dropped 45. It's not totally consistent yet, but it's getting to a point where you're able to look at this and say, hey, 25, 26 a night scorer in the NBA with real minutes. Yeah, Mikal Bridges can be that guy. He was 11 for 19 in this game. He played 37 minutes, scored 31 points, had a couple really nice baskets squared up on Giannis, one for a mid-range jumper that, kind of open your eyes a little bit and say, hey, if this is the kind of guy that feels comfortable getting into the mid-range against one of the best, if not the best defender in all of basketball in Giannis, like, that's a guy who believes in what he can do on the offensive end. That is the kind of situation we're staring at with Bridges. And I think as we kind of continue on through the rest of the season, it will be a Mikal Bridges watch probably around like what we think the ultimate upside for him is going to be as a basketball player. He'll forever be a guy that was traded for Kevin Durant. He was the centerpiece of a trade involving Kevin Durant. That is something that comes with you. That is something these guys understand. That's something that, history will sort of tell. Part of his career tale will now be wrapped up in the fact that he was a part of a trade for Kevin Durant. there are multiple ways those kinds of things can go for players, right? Like it can go well, it cannot go well. Some guys can embrace that kind of talk, some guys can not so much. It's clear that Bridges is here to embrace an expanded role. It's clear that it's starting to become like sort of his team. Whether that is the case going all the way forward for him, I'm not sure. Is he going to be on the Brooklyn Nets for a while? I think that's nearly a certainty. I mean, the part where people had said early on, oh, maybe he ends up getting packaged for someone else later on. I don't think look, who knows what's going to ultimately happen. I think that we're going to stare at a situation where not only his contract, but also the like level of play that he looks like he can get to is going to mean that this is just a guy you keep. Bridges is owed $21 million next year, then 23, then 25. This is shaping up to look like one of the best contracts in the entire NBA going forward. And it's because what he was able and is able to show what he can do now on the offensive end as well. If he can be an efficient scorer on a night-to-night basis, if he can, double high teens worth of shots, take 6 to 7 threes, which is basically what he's been doing over the short term. If he's going to knock them down in that 40% range and be able to create his own shot, that's still kind of a work in progress, but you can see it getting there. Then this is, we are brushing up against superstar territory. Putting up 31 points against this Bucks team is not nothing. Like that's a real game from a guy. And again, do we ever judge players on their best performances or their worst performances? No, of course not. That's just not how the NBA works. You can't really judge it in small sample sizes, I don't think. Milwaukee is the third best defensive efficiency in the league this year, and this was a full strength team. They had everybody tonight. They struggled with injuries at times this year. They had everybody, okay? And when they have everybody, this team is as hard a team in the NBA to score on. When you get Drew at point of attack, you have Giannis kind of free safetying, and you have Brook Lopez as one of the best rim protectors in the game. This is going to be a really, really hard team to score on. So for him to be 31 points on efficient shooting, right? 11 for 19 from the field for Bridges, 3 of 7 from 3, got to the line 7 times. Also something you like to see because he's not a guy that really invites contact. This is, if we're going to take a supreme positive from this game, right? Outside of that defensive stuff in the first half, which we know it'd be, if they were able to maintain that kind of thing for the whole game, that's really, the other positive. They weren't able to do it. Bridges is able to maintain most of this scoring sort of efficiency and scoring ability throughout the whole game. And every game that we see like this will dull the pain a little bit more, I think, from a Kevin Durant trade. If that's even something that's affecting you these days. I think people have already bought in to Bridges as kind of the guy on this team. And a 31-point performance against the Bucks team is the part where it does hammer you home. Tough to look at bright sides of losses. I totally get that. But if the Nets are in a transition phase around trying to figure out what they are as a team going forward, then these, thankfully, are the games you can look at with Bridges and say, hey, at least there's this. At least there's this guy. This is a guy we had. What do the draft picks turn into? We don't know, right? That's going to be what it is. Like, we don't know where those Dallas picks are going to land. We don't know where those Suns picks are going to land. Some of those are years away. For the here and now, Mikal Bridges is a rising star. Mikal Bridges is a two-way player. Mikal Bridges is a guy that can be among not the top of the scoring leaders, but he's a guy that's going to score in the mid-20s, could score in the mid-20s going forward in terms of points on a team that can win basketball games. And from that standpoint, that is what you really, like to see from a guy like him against a very, very strong Bucks team. Want to talk about what's coming down the pike here in terms of schedule, where the Nets stand, where in the standings, and where it looks like, they could be maybe headed for in terms of the playoffs or the play-in game. Going to get to that in a second. But Nets fans, got to tell you right now about the best Cali Mexican food in your area. That's Brooklyn Borough. It's close to Barclays. It's the best Mexican food out there. Adam and I have been there. They rolled the red carpet out. Pepe and friends know what they're doing. If you want to talk about pride in food, taste in food, ambiance, everything, Brooklyn Borough is where it's at. It's at 922 Fulton Street. You can check it on the map. Go over to Yelp. They're going to and check out the Yelp reviews too, because these things are off the charts. That's because the food's off the charts, the service is off the charts, and they just know how to do this. We ate there. The fresh meat is prepped, seasoned, grilled to perfection. They got the salsa bar that you really actually, Adam couldn't walk away from. Neither could I. The cervezas are ice cold. They have margaritas as well. And all you have to do as a Locked On Nets fan, you go in there, you're going to get a free baby burrito, free food. Who loves free food? Everyone loves free food. And when the food is great, that free food's even better. It's a free baby burrito with the purchase of a Mission Burrito. All you have to do is tell them that you're a Locked On Nets fan. Mention Adam and I. Yell out Locked On Nets. Just walk in there and scream out Locked On Nets. Baby burritos are coming your way after you buy a Mission Burrito. 922 Fulton Street. Brooklyn Borough brings original San Francisco Mission District burritos and delicious Cali Mexican favorites right here to Brooklyn, just a stop away from Barclays. 922 Fulton Street, Brooklyn Borough. Order, unwrap, enjoy. Unwrap more. Finish, come back, smile. All right, one of the reasons that we saw the Nets sort of raise the white flag in this game was because they are on the front end of a back-to-back where they have to go and play crosstown New York Knicks on Wednesday. There's a very tough stretch of games for the Nets. This is, again, it's a stretch through the Eastern Conference among team. Look, every team wants to win games, so not every team. Spurs and a couple other teams aren't all that. Hornets aren't all that interested in winning. Most teams in the NBA want to win. And the Nets are running through sort of a mini gauntlet of these teams right now. Started with Philly. They dropped on us. Obviously, we know how that game ended. Then the Knicks are playing really, really well right now. The Knicks are climbing in the standings. They're up to 5th. They vaulted over the Nets. They've won 6 in a row. They lost to the Knicks. Then we obviously know that the Nets pulled out the game against Miami. That was a really, really nice win. Brutal loss to Chicago. Chicago's fighting their way, trying to get into the play-in game. They're sitting right around the edge of that. Then the Nets lose the buzzer beater to Atlanta. Atlanta obviously is in that play-in mix as well. So these are all games that are super motivated. Obviously, we talked about the Bucks. They're winning every single game no matter what. And now they have to go to MSG to face the Knicks, who definitely want to start separating themselves from the rest of the play-in. And they're probably going to be able to do that with the way they're playing. So this is going to be a tough one. Then the Nets have to go to Boston, who's fighting still to kind of try to fight out for the number 1 seed. They're somehow out of the number 1 seed right now, only because the Bucks have been playing so well. So they get to go to Boston, and then there's a little mini run with Charlotte and Houston, and then back to Milwaukee. Hopefully, it'd be great to take at least one of these 2 games against New York and Boston. These are going to be really tough games. Like, these are tough games. These teams they're fighting it out in the East. Seeding is starting to really matter for these teams. Home court advantage is, at least for the first round, is on the table right for the Knicks right now, because if they can try to catch the Cavs, we'll see if that's even possible. They definitely don't even want to screw around with the play-in game. Banking wins against teams like the Nets in MSG, New York kind of atmosphere, just any story that you want to tell around that. Very tough game. We know Boston basically has the Nets number at this point, is one of the, if not the best team in basketball. These next 2 games aren't getting any easier for the Nets. Charlotte and Houston, should they be wins? Yeah. Are those teams basically donezo? Yeah, like LaMelo's out for the season for the Hornets. The Rockets are a complete and utter dumpster fire. So you would hope that the Nets can bring in at least enough into those 2. And I'm not in right here just writing off the Knicks and Celtics games as losses. Look, we've seen the Nets be able to play these teams really tough. Outside of that Chicago game, most of these performances by the Nets have been pretty hard fought games. Like, they could have won the Atlanta game, right? Like, Spencer Dinwiddie hit that buzzer beater against Philly that would have sent it to overtime. He was just a millisecond too late. So, like, in terms of point differential outside of the Chicago game, and I know you can't just take these games away, it hasn't been too bad. But we saw this already happen with the Knicks a couple weeks ago, where 2 weeks ago, where they lost 124-106. At that time, the Nets struggled in that game. They couldn't really stop. Jalen Brunson just got whatever he wanted. He ended up dropping 40. So this is going to be a tough one, and the Celtics are going to be a tough one too. And this is where, as a Nets fan, like, you kind of have to buckle up a little bit here, right? Like, buckle up for a little bit of a bumpy ride. in terms of what the expectation level is for this team going forward. I mean, are we starting to start thinking about play-in situations? Yeah, you have to start really thinking about that. They're only a game and a half up on the Heat. Heat are getting healthier, right? And they're just a tougher team right now. The Hawks, they're 3.5 games up on the Hawks right now. The Nets are. That's a team that just switched coaches and probably has got a lot to prove. Raptors and Wizards, they are 4 and 5 games respectively above those teams. But, like Wizards are without Porzingis. Raptors just got Fred VanVleet back. Well, if the Nets play like this and they just keep dropping games, are we headed for a play-in situation? They might be. I thought they'd be more like a 500 team after this All-Star break. After the trade deadline. I thought the team was trending a little more toward like an average team than a great team or a bad team. But they just might not have the horses here. They might just not have it fully able to put big wins. It might just be they don't have enough top end talent. Like they have a lot of good players outside of maybe Bridges, and depending on what you think of Claxton, like no real great players. And that is a tough recipe for long-term or even short-term success when it comes to the NBA. And that's the situation the Nets are going to find themselves in here. So the stretch is not going to get any easier. It's going to be a situation where the Knicks and Celtics are going to definitely both want to pick them off. Coming on the back against New York is always a tough situation, even when it's a home and home piece of it, or at least when it's in the same city. It's not a home game against the Knicks, but there's no travel involved. So it's a situation where, yeah, maybe they got a little bit of rest, but some of these guys played major minutes tonight. Like Bridges played 37 minutes. Okay. I mean, Dinwiddie still played 35 minutes. None of the bench guys really played out at all, except for Royce O'Neal. But it wasn't like everyone got a complete night off. And I already told you about how difficult it was for the Nets at both ends of the court. So this is a situation that could get a little rougher in the short term for the Nets until they maybe get some low-hanging fruit against Charlotte and Houston. And maybe we are headed a little closer to this play-in game situation when it comes to the playoffs than maybe I thought. Maybe I was just looking at this situation with glasses that were a bit too rose-colored. Sometimes that's what can happen to you in the NBA, especially when you're rooting for a team and you want that team to do well and you want to be glass half full. And the Nets are making that a little tough right now, just with the way they are playing. All right. Adam and I are going to be back after the Knicks game on Wednesday evening. We'll be covering whatever the result is here. We'll be on here together live on YouTube. If you're listening on the podcast feed, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets over at YouTube. I'll stay in here for a little bit longer after the podcast to answer some questions. So if you have some, go over to @LockedOnNets. And if you're on the podcast feed, look, I've said this a million times, you got to get over to YouTube. It's where the extra sauce is made, right? Visit our friends over at Brooklyn Borough. Visit our friends over at FanDuel. That is how you help the show. And you also help by subscribing wherever you listen on podcasts or the aforementioned YouTube. Get to this point of the podcast where Adam is always great with the quotes from the great American poets. I always come up short. That's because Adam is one of the great American poets. We will be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball. All right, live on YouTube. If you have some questions, I see folks in the chat here duking it out about the state of the Nets. Try to keep one eye on the comment section while we're podcasting. It's always tough to kind of keep a flow of your thoughts around the game and everything you want to say about where the Nets are and everything, and also see sort of how the fan base is reacting, which is always kind of the case on YouTube. And I think that, I can see kind of frustration starting to brew through here. Some of the issues that starting to see some of the issues that people are having. I have a couple here that I'm going to throw up. Let me just take a drink of water. Okay, this wasn't a question, but a comment, but I thought I'd throw it out there because it didn't talk about Cam Thomas in this game. That I thought it was interesting coming off a game or a podcast where Adam and I had talked about, whether or not Cam should be starting or not. We kind of landed on 6-man role, and that was going to be the situation that we thought he's going to be in and best suited for. This was a rough game for him. I see Ivan says here, Cam Thomas game is going to get worse and worse playing for the Brooklyn Nets. JV is changing his style. So they actually made a comment about this. It was kind of obvious that there was maybe some tension happening with Jacques Vaughn and maybe Cam Thomas even on the court, where Vaughn was clearly, calling out things that he wanted Thomas to do, and Thomas was at varying levels doing them or not doing them on the court. Did not shoot, very unlike Cam Thomas, did not shoot a wide open three at one point. Did have a nice penetration kick out for some ball movement around the perimeter. He struggled to get his shot to go. He did some hero heaves in here. He was 0 for 7 overall. Look, we have to expect that with the Cam Thomas experience. At times, it's not always going to be super, super efficient. This is a very difficult defensive matchup, especially for his game, because he wants to try to get to the rim. He wants to draw contact, and that's just not going to be, that's not ripe for the picking against guys like Giannis and Brook Lopez, and then having a perimeter defender like Drew Holiday. It's going to be a really tough game for a guy like Cam. In terms of changing his style, I don't know if I agree with that. Like, I've wondered at times how much Cam's style is like great for team basketball. I think he has a great skill set for sure. And I think that he has, clearly a role in the NBA. But like stylistically, I can see at times where that's not going to totally fit. So I don't know if it's like a stylistic thing. I think it's clear that they clash though on style. So maybe it depends on what you think the style should be. But it's clear that there's continued sort of, like I said, tension around this situation, and the minutes decreased for him. The rotation got a little bit longer. Like, if you track rotations, he came in a little bit later in this situation, in this game. Like, he basically didn't come in to the end of the third quarter. Like, Dinwiddie played way further through his normal rotation and where Cam would have been. So that got buzzed a little bit. I don't know. I'm not really sure where this situation's heading. It's weird. It's funny about one game after having podcasted about Cam Thomas and his role going forward that the role gets reduced. But hey, that's what happens in the podcast world sometimes. Who are our best 8, and can Claxton get enough support? Didn't expect to hear that can Claxton get enough support, but that's the ascension of Nick Claxton. I think the best 8 for the Nets off the top of my head here, it's actually probably pretty clear. It's actually probably who number 8 is. That's the question, because I think the clear best 8 here in no particular order are Mikal Bridges, Nick Claxton, Spencer Dinwiddie, Cam Johnson. I'll put Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Thomas as like ties, right? Whatever, just because they both do one end of the floor really well and the other end of the floor really poorly. And then Royce O'Neal. And then the problem is after that, it's like, who's the 8th best guy? Like, I'm not actually sure. It looks like the Nets aren't sure either. Like, these guys were completely buried tonight. Joe Harris buried, Seth Curry buried. Yuta was hurt. Patty Mills just done. And then some of their personal was out. I think he's expecting. So he and his family are expecting, I believe. So he was just out of the mix, although he's been buried too. I don't know who their best 8th best player is. I'm tempted to say it's Harris, although he hasn't done anything to prove it. So I'm not really sure. I'm not sure I can make a great case for it. I'm using a little bit of historical stuff rather than actual what's happening in the here and now. He looks just lost on the court. They can't get him shots. They don't have the good enough ball movement to get him just like open, stand alone looks. His game looked a lot better when it was kind of Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant had so much gravity around the defense. When that's not around, it looks really, really bad for Harris. So I'm not sure. I think I know who the top 7 guys in this team are, but I definitely don't think I know who the 8th best player is on the team. A couple of other housekeeping notes. Ben Simmons, there was rumors that they were shutting him down, that then Jacques Vaughn came out and said that it's just not true. So, but they also gave no indication about when he was going to actually come back. Do I think he's going to come back this season? Who knows? Who knows with Ben Simmons? I mean, this is just a total mystery. So he's someone best 8 players. It's a total mystery. I'm looking at the Ben Simmons situation as like, if he plays again this season and he does anything, then it's like a bonus. My expectations for that situation are basically at 0 right now. So I think that I just have no expectation. If he plays and he's great, I don't think it's going to happen, but if he plays and he's great, it's all bonus. House money at this point, even though the Nets owe the house millions and $40 million going forward, because the contract looks pretty rough right now. Will we see more Yuta and Edmund? Sure doesn't look like it. Watanabe was hurt tonight, and Edmund Sumner was out, so they're both out tonight. Like them not playing tonight isn't an indictment on like their playing time right now, and Yuta's going to sit out next game as well. So I don't think that them not playing tonight is like not some kind of thing where they're buried. They were both out prior to the game. Like I said, Sumner has a personal was with out with a personal issue, I believe, a family thing, and then Yuta Watanabe has a back problem, so them not playing is not surprising to me, but I don't think there's going to be a ton of minutes for them because that just doesn't seem to be the way Vaughn wants to play here. And these rotations are super small, 7 to 8 guys tops. Whether that's the correct thing to do right now, I'm not sure. It's not like these guys are coming off the bench and lighting the world on fire either. So I just don't know. They're in a weird situation right now. I'm just looking around for any other questions here, but yeah, I'm not seeing tons. That's okay because I can see people are arguing about Cam Thomas and arguing about some other stuff, and maybe the Jacques Vaughn thing. We got a North Dakota shout out. That's the kind of stuff that's happening in in the chat right now. One more thing about Simmons. Somebody please tell Ben Simmons do speedball training to improve his shooting. I'm going to give you a thing that's going to clear your mind on this, Chang BXY. That's going to make you sleep better at night and never have to worry about this again. This is never happening. The shooting is never going to improve. How do I know that? Because it never has. It's only gotten worse. There's no chance. I will bet a huge sum of money, I mean, for me, sum of money on this particular part of his game never getting any better. The reason I know it is because every single year, the shots dropped, the efficiency drops, the free throw shooting gets worse. It all is bad. Like this is just, that's just, he doesn't, they've wanted him to shoot since the day he entered the league. He never does it. He never has. It's never getting better. They can I'm sure it's been mentioned to him many times that the game would be significantly easier for him if he could shoot. He doesn't want to do it. So that's never going to happen. And I'm just doing that to save yourself some sanity. And that's it. Do I think we can honestly beat the Knicks? Probably not. But I'd be excited. I'm going into the rest of the season, like kind of what I said about like Ben Simmons. My expectations weren't really that high to begin with. Like the second they traded Durant, my expectations did for like huge winning. I dropped a little bit. So these kind of games aren't all that surprising to me. I'm cheering like crazy for them. I want them to win. Everything's better when they win for sure. But I just don't have very, very high expectations. It's just, that's just the nature of this team. You can see the talent. NBA success is dictated by top end talent. The Nets don't have any of that right now. And when you don't have any of that, it's going to be really, really tough. They're going to get games like this where it looks good for stretches and then it kind of fizzles. So that's just the way it is. So, man, there's a lot of North Dakota shout outs here in the YouTube. Okay. Look, we're on a back-to-back, so I'm going to cut this a little short. We will definitely be back here, probably no matter what, just because Adam and I tend to go a little longer on YouTube when we're together. That's just the way it is. So I'll probably cut it a little short here with the promise that tomorrow night after the Knicks, win or lose, we'll be back here chopping it up. People always like to get in to see what's going on when it ever comes down to stuff with the Knicks. Obviously, MSG, it's the whole thing. So we'll be back again tomorrow. Appreciate everyone jumping here over on YouTube. Someone said they're a mind expert more than basketball. I don't know what a mind expert is. Whatever that is, I'll take your word for it. But I don't know what a mind expert is. I was trying to figure that out, but maybe I'm not a mind expert enough to figure it out. So there you go. Okay. We will be back again tomorrow following the Knicks game. Appreciate everyone jumping in to YouTube. And like I said before, but I'll say it again, I'm back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.